Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, Iowa soccer supporters. I'm Ben Brackett, your Soccer Talk co-host, alongside my good buddy Blake Siebers. Siebes, what's up?
Good morning. Love it. Big. I'm in a good mood today. It's nice weather.
And a reason to wear your Johnston Dragons
Yeah.
top.
Plug the YouTube channel. The great coach gave this to us last year, so I'm a proud alumni today.
Who's that?
Jimmy Frizzell.
Oh, Jimbo. So we went and watched Johnston Dragons travel across town to the Dowling Catholic Maroons on a lovely evening. It was a pretty good game, really, overall. Although I don't know, Matt Sahag, the Titan tactician, the admiral of analysis, is here. Hi, Matt.
Okay. I mean, some would call 4-1 a blowout, though.
That's true. Lots of talking points, really. Lots of things talked about.
Yeah.
What'd you think, Matt?
Well, it's interesting that we went to a Johnston game. Last week we went to a Valley game. I'm not sure who's selecting these games of the week, but the panel is clearly a little biased. I may play devil's advocate today.
I think
we're going to
Johnston, see the Boylan Titans here next week. So,
well, maybe we should really quickly just give an idea, because people, I think, are probably wondering why. So we've made it a point that every team that has signed up for our free high school futsal preseason event has been featured. So Dowling entered a couple teams. Actually, you know what? It's good that Dowling got smacked, because those boys don't know how to play in the winter in the snow, do they? So I'm still a little, just so everybody's aware, Dowling two teams backed out of our high school futsal event because it was cold and snowing. And you see on the next week, 2 days later, they're out in preseason. It's snowing out. So we had it completely messed up our rosters, but guess what? One of their teams showed up, and all the other teams showed up as well. So
wow, he's on fire.
Yeah,
he's real fired.
They play the dragon, and here's the dragon. He's coming out.
I wore my Dowling maroon today just to antagonize him.
But we done so. We try to feature those teams, those coaches that have helped us put teams in
as best we can.
Yeah. Sorry, guys, to go off.
Get all fired up. We didn't even plan that. That just came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
So, anyway, if we don't feature you this year when you came to one of our futsal events, I apologize in advance. So, okay. So, Dowling coming into the game number 1, Johnston ranked number 6. We are friends with both coaches, good friends of the pod. And talking to Jimmy ahead of the season, they hosted a 7v7 event at their fields and didn't even get out of their group, and started the season a little bit rocky. And so we were teasing Jim that they might be up against him, but they've really turned things around, at least since a little bit of a rocky start, and find themselves moving up in the rankings and knocking off the number 1 team in the state. Looks like that's gonna go with no response. Dowling, on the other hand, coming in the game after a good string of wins. They were undefeated at 5-0, and it looked a little bit like kind of one of their weaknesses was that they would seem like they'd score a goal and give up a goal. That they weren't scoring goals and just staying on top of teams. And that seemed to come back and haunt them again last night.
Yeah, I mean, there were quite a few goals in the game, but the biggest takeaway for me is that I think each team gifted the other team every single one of the goals. If I recall correctly, I would have to watch the tape back, but I'm almost positive in the 5 goals in the game, they were all from turnovers. A lot of those turnovers at the back, or maybe as I reflect, actually, there was one where the 2 Dowling center backs clashed into each other. One stepped on someone's foot and then led to a goal. But even if I think a lot of unforced errors in that game resulted in some goals. So you can argue it both ways. You could say, hey, Johnston did a really good job of pressuring Dowling's back 3, back 4, whatever they had, and nicked a couple of balls and resulted in a bunch of corners, or you could just say Dowling had a bunch of unforced errors.
Fair enough. So that first goal from Dowling actually was a decent little goal. And some nice little interchange from their front 3, 2 or 3 up there. But it did come off of a turnover after that, and then the quick counter to score. And who was the goal scorer for that first one for Dowling?
That was that Mendez.
Yeah, Mendez, good little player.
Yeah, I liked him.
Yeah, same. And then did Barca? Is it Barca? Is that how do you say his name?
Henry Abarca. Yeah, but he. What was your question? I guess
thought
Ben.
he slipped the ball through to him.
Oh, it says Enrico Santori Fernandez did.
Well, I apologize, Enrico. So assist from Enrico, and then so we kind of place erupts as far as a small high school stadium goes, which we had a comment on that too, right? What was the comment on that?
There was no atmosphere, and the teams were so Johnston was standing up from the kickoff. Yeah, Dowling was sitting down, and then Dowling ended up standing up after it got to be.
Well, so this is 90 seconds after Dowling goes up 1-0, Johnston comes back the other way, and it's like 2 or 3 chances in a row where it's like goalie makes a save, somebody blocks it, and then somebody slams it home. I think it was Kyron Pope who reacted most quickly to make it 1-1, and Johnson was real fired up after that, weren't they?
Yeah, definitely. You would have thought that after, it looked like, there was a clear momentum shift because Dowling gets the first goal. You're thinking, wow, there's the number one in the state. Number one team in the state. They've gone up 1-0. It looks like they're growing into the game. And that was my observation. I thought that they were getting better. And then all of a sudden the equalizer comes and things change.
Yeah, real quickly, didn't they?
Halftime 1-1.
Yep. And we had some good chats with the head coaches. So check those out on Instagram.
Jimmy Frizzell looks like a hero now after we hassled him about his finishing, and the finishing for the group. They come and smash 3 in the second half.
Yeah. So Sievers kept with his momentum from last night, asking pointed questions coming into this morning. He's all fired up too. So it just goes to show you when the Johnston Dragons are in the mix, can't keep a dragon from breathing fire.
Well, not to rain on his parade or anything, but or Jimmy and his staff and the boys, but I'll probably, I don't know if anyone will agree with me, but I actually thought that this game was a lot like the Southeast Polk and Newton game that we saw, where you kind of walk into the game, you see, we saw Southeast Polk a couple of weeks ago, controlling the run of play, passing it around, keeping possession, and you look up at the score and you wonder why it ended up 4-1 in Newton's favor. It was almost, for me, the exact same thing in this game. I think that Dowling's got the better side collectively. I think they were better on the ball technically by a good margin, but all of that really is for naught because they didn't win the game. So Johnston, on the other hand, I think is a team that probably is going to will themselves to goal by forcing turnovers, by getting it to Pope, who's got an extra gear. I think he can get around. He often got around the left or the right back, and he looked threatening to score, and he scored a couple of goals, and he has that kind of trademark backflip too that we've seen a lot of. But for me, Johnston is going to be a team that defends, wins the balls, and counters. They're not going to be a team that you see build the ball like from the back to the front, and Dowling's just the opposite. So for Dowling, I think the game just got stagnant, and it was very, one pace. You really didn't see any of those guys ever kind of kick into the next gear. I think speed of play was a real issue for them last night. And for me, it goes back to when you almost lull yourself to sleep when you just kind of play these passes from side to side and you struggle to kind of get the ball forward. Again, I think just to increase the speed of play for Dowling, I would love to see their defenders and their midfielders, when they play the ball forwards, follow their pass and go get the next one. I thought, Gradell for me was one of the most influential players on the field. He's a really good player. I like him a lot because he's very technical and he's got good physical stature as well. And I would bet that in terms of touches, he may have touched the ball 80 times last night, and far far more than anyone else. But if you go watch that video, his passes are sideways and backwards, and they rarely go forwards and penetrate, and they rarely get played into feet. And I think they've got to figure that out, because I think that influences speed of play. So there was one distinct moment last night that I remember that I thought was, wow, that was really good, where he got the ball and he plays it forwards with the outside of his foot, kind of goes a little bit around the corner into the striker's feet, and it got played in, and then it got played backwards back into their other midfielder. And they kind of started to look like they were going to create something. I think that they can start to replicate things like that, where he plays forward and he actually gets out of that number 6 role and moves forward. There's a little rotation in midfield. I think they could be really dangerous. But on that field last night, it just felt like they possessed it a lot, but then it was really stagnant. And the longer they possessed it and it gets stagnant and congested, I think the more risk they have in turning the ball over. And I wonder if that's what happened. Yeah.
Unfortunately. And then Johnston, their goal was to just get out there and get after him, right? They weren't out there to play anything pretty. No offense,
Right.
Jim.
Yeah, no offense. I don't think they're a pretty soccer team. I mean, and I would be very shocked if Jimmy had a team like that. He just doesn't sort of come off as the let's play pretty soccer and keep the ball. He's sort of like, let's score and win the game. And they did that 4 times last night.
Yeah. And it almost, it looked like Dowling, after they went down 2-1, there was still a game there, right? For, 10-ish minutes. I don't know. I'd have to look at the actual time, but it was still happening. And then the third goal really just killed the game off. And the fourth goal almost came as like, the game was already, done and dusted at that point. That was how I looked at it, at least. And it actually ended up an own goal. And it looked like the Dowling boys were just sort of like, they'd just been fully deflated at that point.
Yeah. I was really surprised Johnston kept scoring. I was like, wow, another one and another one. And I mean, you just know it's not Dowling's night when the ball comes over the top and the center backs clash into each other, and one actually steps on the other one's shoe and his shoe comes off. I mean, that describes their night.
Yeah, it wasn't a good night.
And then the guy just slots it home.
Yeah. Well, I think even
that's tough.
Yeah. And then the third goal was like, like slipped through the goalkeeper's legs. It was like it was a little bit of it was a tough one there at the end for the Catholic boys.
Sometimes it's not your night. And I see the Dragon's pretty silent over here. He's not really.
The game did the talking, didn't it?
He's not really defending his team. But for me, honestly, I think Dowling's a better team. Sorry, Johnston. I really do. I think I'd be cautious in the next game if I was Johnston in coming in a little bit too confident. That 4-1 result is a fantastic result for them. But I think if they play them again, I think they've got to be cautious, because Dowling's going to have a real chip on their shoulder. And maybe it was good for Dowling to get knocked off too. It's one of those two. Like, hey, number 1, too. It's early. We're really good, but
could be a nice wake-up call for him.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Johnston, you talk about next game. The next 2 games are Valley and Centennial. So going through a little bit of a grind there now.
The old buzzsaw, as Jim likes to say. It's interesting too, because for all the sort of light criticism you're providing towards Johnston, I think that what they have shown is they can clearly win some games, and they can get out there and disrupt their opponents. They've beaten Waukee Northwest. They've beaten now Dowling. It'll be interesting to see how they do against Valley and Centennial, 2 other tough teams here in the Metro. Who else, Blake? You look like.
Yeah, I mean, they beat Ankeny, who's I think having a down year. They beat Linmar. They won the Merle Hay Cup. So remember old Millard West from Omaha? Like, I don't know if they're any good anymore, but they used to be a decent little school. So,
So as a Johnston Dragon, how do you feel walking out of there last night, Sibo?
Like, I mean, it doesn't matter, right? If it looks good or not, you just went in and smashed the number 1 team. And like you guys said, I mean, they've now won 6 in a row after,
tough start.
Yeah. I don't know if Jimmy should have kept his job, honestly, after losing, starting the season 0-2. I'm not sure if I'm the only one that thought that either, but no, they're on a roll, and they got to keep it moving. Because they've got those 2 games, and I mean, East they play here coming up at the end of the year, and then Nice City West. So it's good as long as you keep winning. It doesn't really matter how it looks.
Well, if you haven't watched the roundtable, you should go back and watch it again. And you should specifically, if you don't want to watch the whole thing, I mean, you should watch the whole thing, but if you don't want to watch the whole thing, go back to our Instagram account and you'll pull up Jimmy, and I think he's got a pretty good soundbite where he says that nobody will like outplay them from a tactical perspective.
Get out
Outcoached.
He's not getting out coach. Okay. So fair enough. So he's 1-4-1 now. I don't know what his defense is for those first couple of games when he got beat, but he's on six in a row now. And so I'd love to see someone come up with a plan and see if maybe they can out tactic him.
And I think Dowling's got it tidied up in the back. I mean, you look at they've given away a lot of goals, 10, 14 goals in, how many games have they played? 6, 7, something like that. So
Shout out Garrett Crawl.
yeah, he crawled sort of, I mean,
Sort out the boys in the back.
you do. Because if they do it, they tighten that up. It's
Yeah,
going to be
they do.
tough to,
They've given a lot of goals away too.
I mean, they beat Norwalk 5-3, Centennial 4-3, Ames 4-2.
Wow.
So again, like,
They're winning, but
yeah, I didn't see it, but like clearly they had an off night because it's not like they had 4 sure chances last night even.
yeah, you would have thought that just based on previous score lines, if Johnston was going to score 4 on them, you would have thought they would have scored 5 or 6.
Exactly.
What about well, so we'll give a little bit of a hard time to Crawl. One thing we also pointed out, I think that has nothing to do with Crawl, but just in general, it didn't seem like the Dowling goalkeeper loved the old Oliver Kahn punt where he just like boots it really high, and those suck as players no matter what, right? To head or but it looked like no one wanted to head the ball at all.
It didn't look like it. It was that was the reality.
I don't want to head an Oliver Kahn punt either, but like every ball in the air seemed uncontested. And then I even look back to like last week again, Waukegan Valley, Northwest Waukegan Valley. There was only like that. The Knipsey was decent in the air, but nobody else seemed to want to win a ball in the air. And I'm just like, man, that was such a staple and a hallmark of the game when we were growing up. And I understand there's some some health concerns around heading the ball, but if you do it properly, I don't know if there is.
So you remember the other moment last night was where the ball kind of, I think this was Dowling was attacking towards us in the first half, right? Yeah.
Mhm.
So the ball comes across and takes kind of a weird hop, and it's coming directly to the Dowling player's head. And all he has to do is kind of just jump and meet it and attack it going forward.
And it's a shot on goal.
And he kind of like just glances it off to the side, and it would have been a kind of a last minute body adjustment, but all he has to do is move his body and just kind of nudge it forward, and he probably scores. But to your point, there was a lack of desire to play with your head.
Well, and there's like there's 2 parts to it, right? Like nobody wants to head an Oliver Kahn punt. Like that sucks.
That wasn't even Oliver Kahn.
But that's what I'm saying. It's like there's no technique or the ability to just.
By the way,
You've ever seen Oliver Kahn punt the ball?
I've just seen it punt, but I've never heard of it.
It goes off the television.
I've never heard it described as a.
I'm struggling. I'm like, well, that's an Oliver Kahn punt. They all go like 50 feet in the air. It's like
Just watch one sometime, like specifically.
I'd rather. I mean, I don't know who just like hits the missiles, but I'd rather take your Oliver Kahn punt than one that just is.
Yeah,
driven.
the old like side volley. Yeah. Well, okay. Regardless, it seems like there's a little bit of a lack of desire to head the ball, but also I think some of that might just be like they haven't been taught. There's no technique there. And that was like one of those things. Like I don't know, we were learning that pretty early. I don't know. Maybe I'm just going to get off on a little tangent here.
Yeah, you are off on a tangent, but I'll say this about headers. All right. So what drives me kind of nuts a little bit about the header thing is when people say if you head it properly, there's no medical concern. Because
I said that earlier.
I know you did. I did. You did. So it's definitely obviously something that a talking point. It changes the game dramatically when you don't have headers because, I mean, that's how you win the ball at its highest point, right? So I'm not going to give an opinion one way or the other on whether it's good for you or not because I'm not a doctor. I'm not a brain surgeon. I have to imagine that it's not good for you either way, right? It's also not good to play American football and smash each other in the head with helmets.
Fair.
But when people say, well, I'm a youth soccer coach and I can teach you how to head this ball properly and it won't get you injured. That's where I struggle.
Fair enough.
Also, my only commentary on this is when you're battling, you never head a ball properly because you're fighting with another guy. So you never get like the chance to head it actually properly on your forehead. It always goes off the side of your head or the top because you're battling and fighting.
Right. That's
Is
how
that what happened?
I
to your
mean,
face?
that's how I like though. I mean, I would argue like when I used to play, like that may have been like the best surface of my body to play with. Like I wasn't always super technical with my feet, but I would win the ball a lot in the air because I wanted to, And I think you're right. I think that was noticeably missing from last night, but I can't think of a player who's been dominant in the air that we watched yet this year.
No, I'm not in a while. And your point's well taken on the medical side of it. I'm just waiting for my CTE to kick in.
One thing I'll just get in before we wrap this up. Something's cool. Dowling, Iowa Catholic Radio. Those guys have all their home games on the radio, interviewing the players, the coaches. So Ben Teeling, Tanner Kraus, well done. That's
Also Charlie Bales occasionally.
yeah. So we had it on.
Yeah.
We were listening to the
cool.
play-by-play as we were watching the game.
Yeah, and those guys it's cool because they're alumni of the program. So
And soccer brains.
And there's a clear bias, which is a good thing. So remember after the first goal, we heard Tanner.
Oh, Tanner Kraus.
That was great. I mean, listen to that. Go back and
that.
listen to that.
I want to get
Tanner.
that soundbite for you,
It was
Tanner.
great. What is it? Dowling 1-0. Dowling 1-0. Dowling 1-0.
1-0 Dowling.
Okay.
It was great.
It was great.
So shout out. It's at Iowa Catholic Radio on Instagram. And then that would what was it on the dial? Is it 88.5 here in Des Moines? FM?
Sure. I don't know.
I think that's right. But if at the worst, you can just Google Iowa Catholic Radio Des Moines and stream it or whatever. And it was super cool. And again, like I love it when these like alumni get involved in their programs in whatever way. And that's clearly what's going on at both of these programs, really, right? At Dowling and at Johnston.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, how long's Teeling been there now? 3 or 4 years?
I think this is his second or third season.
Okay.
It's certainly not more than this third.
All right. I think we're seeing some programs across the board benefit from alumni or kind of young guys and girls coming into programs, staying for a little bit and bringing some good stuff. And I think Dowling's a good example of that. And also Johnston too, because Jimmy's now been there for a couple of years.
Yeah. Right on. Well, let's wrap it up. I think both teams, I think we can safely say are capable of being at the state tournament, but it'll all kind of rely on form and, sort of where they land in the sub-state.
And new updated rankings, which is super cool. So that win knocks Dowling to number 4, Johnston to number 3, Northwest at 2, and Cedar Rapids Kennedy at 1.
Who rounds out the 5th?
Valley.
Oh, my Tigers. Let's go. All right. Well, we'll be back with another game of the week next week, but actually probably before that, we'll have another response from our Eastern Iowa correspondent, Eric Cortez.
Yeah, he went to Iowa City West, Iowa City High on the boys' side. That was played at Iowa Women's Complex. So stay tuned for that. Good insight. Hopefully the Eastern Iowa folks appreciate it.
At least they're noticing. All right. Well, thank you to the Titan Tactician, Siebes. We'll see you next time.